have been taking my time with my thoughts on the season 2 finale of House of the Dragon. There are a couple of reasons for this. For one, I was very disappointed by the episode in a way that just made me feel a bit defeated as a fan.
So what was the fucking point in all this then?
And two, I didn't want to just give you that pessimistic knee-jerk reaction. I wanted to see how this finale sits with me once I had some time to think about it. Yeah, I'm still pretty negative about it. Actually, the longer I sat with it, the more negative I got, especially after rewatching it, but mostly I'm just sad. Sad as a big fan of this fantasy universe because of the already wasted potential. Sad as a fan of the first season of House of the Dragon because I don't think the show is even consistent with itself. Sad when I think about what all of this means for the show going forward. Sad as a person who loves good writing and interesting characters. And yeah, I'm also sad as a book reader and a fan of George R. R. Martin's work. So this video may end up being a bit of a selective rant instead of me going through everything scene by scene as I normally do. I'm still going to talk about the best things about the finale, but mostly I'm going to talk about my issues with it, my overall thoughts and concerns about the episode and the season as a whole, as well as what all of this might mean going forward. Obviously, spoilers for this entire season, but of course, no spoilers for future events from the book. So, The Queen Who Ever Was. What a strange title for this season finale because no queen takeover of King's Landing happens, and I'm not even sure this makes grammatical sense, but let me start with some positives. My favorite scene in this episode, unexpectedly, was the exchange between Kristen Cole and Gwaine Hightower. Maybe because I'm about as optimistic about the show now as Sir Kristen is about the state of things in his life, but regardless, this was some of the best writing we've seen in these last few episodes. Cole's arc this entire season has been about peeling back the concept of honor he has carried with him his entire life. Honor that has been his armor and guide, even though he doesn't see a path of redemption for himself after Blood and Cheese. But in episode 4, his world changed when he saw dragons join the war. He was faced with something he never imagined. To him, this was apocalyptic. Now, in this scene, we see Kristen Cole question everything he has believed to be his purpose, from the concepts of honor and justice to where this entire war is even going. The dragons dance and men are like dust under their feet. We march now toward our annihilation.
To die will be a kind of relief. Don't you think?
Bleak, very bleak. Even Gwaine needs to sit down after that one. But this is a fantastic character moment and a scene that actually captures the right tone and idea behind this tragic story of the Dance of the Dragons. Another scene I really loved, although I think we should have seen this confrontation a bit earlier in the season, is between Corlys Velaryon and Alan Hall. We finally understand Alan as a character. We hear him release that pent-up anger he has been living with his entire life, watching Corlys ignore him and Adam as he raised his legitimate children. Corlys thinks paying attention to his 2 adult sons now will be enough to build a relationship with them, that they will be grateful for this attention, and while Adam actually might be, Alan isn't having any of this. I love that Corlys, not knowing how to deal with this, tries to just dismiss Alan, but Alan is determined to say what he has to say, and this relationship is clearly not only complicated, but also seemingly beyond repair. This scene really made Alan click for me as a character. Even him shaving off his silver hair back in episode 6 takes on a new meaning with this. What could have seemed as him simply wanting to keep his parentage a secret now seems like an active rejection of his heritage. By the end of the episode, the two head off to war together, their confrontation still hanging in the air, and this dynamic is now very interesting to me going forward. And let's just talk about that final montage since I mentioned them heading off to war. It's great, and it's a beautifully done ending to this episode. You really get that feeling of everything and everyone being in place on the brink of all-out war. The armies are marching, the ships are sailing, Darren is flying onto Sarian, Aegon and Larys are getting out of King's Landing, Otto is in a cell somewhere for some reason. What is up with that? The Stark men are crossing the bridge and the twins in one piece. The dragon seeds are getting ready for battle. The score is beautiful, going through different themes of different houses depending on who's on screen. The cinematography is stunning. The costumes are great. It really builds up your excitement for next week's episode. Oh wait, see you in 2 years. No, but really, that final montage, just as its own thing and something leading up to big events, was beautifully done. I feel like even if you're someone who hated most of this season, and I don't know where you're still watching, but even in that case, I think you still have to admit that was great. Or even if, like me, after watching the scene that comes before this montage, you think ending the season on Alicent is a bit cringe and you kind of want her to jump off that cliff. Finally, the dinner with the dragon seeds is a scene I really appreciated, as much as Ulf keeps giving me severe secondhand embarrassment. It is such a perfect illustration of why Jace was right and why giving beasts of mass destruction to dragon seeds without vetting them in any way is a questionable idea at best. While Adam does seem loyal and Hugh at least tries to act appropriately in front of the Queen, Ulf is so obviously a problem, and his lack of respect is so awkward to watch. And this isn't a criticism, by the way. I think his character is acting exactly how someone like him would act in that situation, and we are meant to question the dragon seeds as people, the same way Jace has been questioning them, and the same way Rhaenyra doesn't seem to fully trust any of them, except for maybe Adam. The dynamic there is certainly uncomfortable, not only because not everyone has the same amount of respect for Rhaenyra and Jace, but also because there's clearly tension between these new dragon riders as well. These 4 scenes were definitely the biggest highlights of the episode for me, and there were a few more details that I enjoyed as well, so I obviously didn't hate episode 8, and it wasn't all bad, but the lows here were so low that they were overshadowing the highs for me, especially since some of them had to do with major characters. This is my general take on season 2, really. Very high highs, very low lows. So let's talk about the negatives. Now, there's actually a competition in my mind for the worst thing about this episode, and it's between Daemon and Alicent. I really don't know which of these I hate more, so let's just start with the character formerly known as my favorite, Daemon Targaryen. Yeah, I said it. It's official. Daemon is no longer my favorite character on House of the Dragon. I still love him in the book, but on the show, I'm sorry, season 2 made him boring, and the finale stole his agency. Now, there are many reasons to hate Daemon's vision. I could nitpick the hilariously bad look of that White Walker, because seriously, who did this? Just reuse Game of Thrones footage. Reuse one of the amazing shots from Hard Home. I could talk about the show's insistence on connecting itself to the final seasons of Game of Thrones, which makes even less sense in this case. It's not like the Targaryen ends up on the Iron Throne or kills the Night King anyway, and everyone hates how the series ended, so why even go there? I could talk about the inclusion of Daenerys in particular, who doesn't really unite Westeros. Her dragons don't really matter in the war against the White Walkers. She isn't really the prince that was promised. She goes mad and burns King's Landing. I could talk about Helena for some reason astral projecting projecting into this vision and acting all chill around the guy who is the reason her son is dead. She got over that really quickly while telling him it's all a story. I mean, are the showrunners okay? Did they forget how much people hated season 8? Do they think the whole story's monologue is a beloved part of Game of Thrones?
There's nothing in the world more powerful than a good story.
But I want to focus on Damon's character arc as a result of that vision, which is where I have my big problem, and it all comes down to the way the show uses prophecy. Now, I have mentioned this before, I have no issue with the inclusion of the prince that was promised prophecy in the show. I think it's an interesting element that can be used well and add to the overall picture. In this case, though, prophecy was used to replace character development, which already is bad on its own, but it's even worse when the character they did this to is defined by his drive to make his own destiny and forge his own path. We know this from season 1. That is who he is and why he is so much fun to watch. Well, was. It also makes Damon's Harrenhal self-discovery and soul-searching arc entirely pointless. You see, I was looking forward to Damon reconciling with Rhaenyra, and honestly, even if I ignore the absurdly childish choice to have him yell "War" as he is sword pumping in the air, because that's totally normal behavior for this almost 50-year-old royal, even if I ignore that, this scene could have been amazing. Except Damon didn't make his choice through any kind of development or self-reflection. He isn't supporting Rhaenyra because he thinks she would be a good queen, or because this is how he shows his love for her, or because he is there to defend his brother's memory, or anything like that. It's because he saw a vision, and that's his part in this story. Wow. How freaking lame. What's his motivation? He has none. He's part of the story. Why did we see him get it on with his mom or behead Rhaenyra? Shock factor. Why did he go through the Harrenhal visions? Because the showrunners didn't know what to do with him, and even when they had character development unfolding right in front of them, they scrapped all of that because why would we have a motivated character? None of that matters. He saw this vision and he is now a changed man. So that bit of writing pissed me off already, because stripping characters of real drive and internal conflict is deeply uninteresting. I mean, you're taking your most fascinating character and not only dragging his plotline in a very repetitive way the entire season, but then also removing his personal motivation and agency, which is what made the character interesting to begin with. But wait, there's more. Let's talk about Alicent. You guys know I have been frustrated with Alicent this entire season because suddenly this is not the same person we saw in the second half of season 1. This is not the feisty Alicent who was ready to take someone's eye out to avenge her kid. Not the Alicent who wasn't afraid to talk back to the king. Not the Alicent who was ready to step in front of a dragon for her children and thought questioning her love for her family is absurd. Who is this woman? Is Alicent in the room with us? Now, I'm not even talking about book Alicent here. The show went in a different direction with her character, and initially I welcomed the change. Adding the layer of a childhood friendship being torn apart to this war is a great idea that adds a much needed personal layer to all of this. You know what's not a great idea though? Having the two of them meet this season the way they did. Twice. I thought Scepter Rhaenyra was ridiculous and contrived already, but this is somehow worse. So she sneaks into Dragonstone. People keep sneaking around this season like it's not a big deal in this situation. Whatever, we're over the logistics. But here's what gets me. This is supposed to be some kind of redemption arc of Alicent doing the right thing as per the show, and that is insane to me. She first wants to leave it all behind and be free with Helena and Jaehaera, to which Rhaenyra pretty quickly agrees. Done deal, right? Nope. She then, apparently to set things right, offers to give up King's Landing to Rhaenyra, casually giving up Aemon's plans, Cole's location, which also means Gwaine, who has been nothing but kind to her, but screw him, and the state of Aegon, which has been kept secret. Rhaenyra wants to put an end to the opposition, so she wants Aegon's head. She has come a long way since a couple of weeks ago in episode 2.
And they are accusing me of having a hand in this. Having lost my own son. That I would inflict such a thing.
Sorry, bestie. Actually, the innocent child wasn't enough. I have no issue with this, though. This is the Rhaenyra I was expecting all along after Luke's death. But you'd think when Rhaenyra brings up a son for a son, Alicent would at least mention poor Jaehaerys. But nah, instead, Alicent agrees to Rhaenyra's request. Who is this person? What parent would do this? Let's recap. She forced Aegon onto the throne he didn't want after failing to prepare him for this, then proceeded to be zero help and instead to belittle him for being unprepared and having no compassion for him after the death of his son, which was the result of her putting him on the throne. That chain of events and Alicent's attitude led him to fly out to Rook's Rest and almost die, and now, after all of this being her fault, she wants to give him up to be killed. And then immediately she's like,
I cast myself on the mercy of a friend who once loved me.
Ma'am, hello, did you hit your head on the way here? Your grandson is dead. Your friend just pressured you into letting her behead your son. Are you delusional or are you stupid? Alicent not only doesn't make sense as a character at this point, but also just as a human being or as a parent. What fucking redemption arc. On top of all that, none of this even matters because as we and the characters know, things have been set in motion. Aemond and everyone supporting the Greens aren't just going to step aside. Even if King Aegon is executed, the line of succession goes forward to Aemond and then to Daeron. So Alicent really doesn't just give up Aegon, which is bad enough. She betrays and gives up her entire family. Aemond says earlier in this episode that her actions have led to them being in the weakened position that they're in, and he is absolutely right. The same way Otto was right back in season 1.
To secure her claim, she'll have to put your children to the sword. She'll have no choice. Either you prepare Aegon to rule, or you cleave to Rhaenyra and pray for her mercy.
The same way not letting her be Queen Regent was the right call because her loyalty is clearly not with the Greens, even though she is the one who pushed Aegon to the throne, which he didn't want. I mean, if the goal was for me to hate this character, good job, show. Well done. Let's not forget that this isn't supposed to be a good guys versus bad guys situation. That's not how George R.R. Martin writes things, and what we're supposed to have is two morally gray groups of people, which makes it interesting, where everyone is capable of good and evil. If what we're seeing is a clear division of who's bad and who's good, that's showing bias and oversimplifying the characters. Meanwhile, season 2 Alicent is a hypocrite, a terrible mother, a terrible politician, and a traitor to her entire family who mostly is written to show how good Rhaenyra is in contrast. And the audacity of these writers to put this line in.
History will paint you a villain.
She is a villain in this scenario. She betrayed her family, her house, anyone loyal to her, and she's a terrible parent who cannot take responsibility for her failures and is willing to trade the lives of her children for a chance to run away. Holy shit. I'm going to move on. I could keep going, but I think you get my point. Considering season 1 Alicent, particularly her adult version, this is the biggest character assassination since season 8 Jaime Lannister.
And for every one of the million people in that city, innocent or otherwise.
To be honest, I never really cared much for them. Innocent or otherwise.
So Damon and Alicent were already enough for me to dislike this episode because they are major characters ruined by the writing. But on top of that, we spend way too much time on Tywin Lannister and Tyrosh and his mud wrestling and singing. I mean, for all the things this season and even this episode skipped over, they could have easily skipped over this whole situation. So many other things I would have rather seen, including Aemond actually burning Sharp Point, but instead we get this comic relief side quest that takes up time, which by the way is Otto's job in the book, and he does none of this. He just sends word, writes some letters because, you know, the blockade is in the way. How did Tyland get past the blockade? Nobody cares. Don't ask questions. But at least we get payoff here. Tyland gets the ships. Unlike the scattered scenes of Rhaena spending the entire episode running around the Vale in search of Sheepstealer, she finds him eventually, and I actually loved how different Sheepstealer looked. They made him look like this evil wild dragon, but does she try to claim him? No, she does not. So not only are we replacing Nettles with Rhaena, but also all we get to see is her running around without packing any food or drink for her journey for some reason. My guess, considering how much they've cut away from things this season, is that we will just see her riding in season 3, even though the way Sheepstealer gets tamed is a really cool part of the book. Also, Helena's visions. Subtlety is apparently dead, and so is ambiguity. I'm not sure why they're doing this because prophecy on Game of Thrones and in the world of Ice and Fire is never this clear. That just makes things boring. If every character is just a part of the story and can't change things, then what is the point of any of this? Why would I, as a viewer, care about what they do, about what their struggles and motivations are, if none of it matters and prophecy is set in stone and delivered clear as day? And prophecy can be used well within a larger story. This is just a poorly written show concept. Underwhelmed and sad is what I am after this episode. And listen, I'm not going to sit here like some others and say things like, this writing is as bad as season 8 of Game of Thrones. That's just not true. Let's be honest. We still have plenty of room to grow here. But I also can't agree with people saying this was a great episode and only bad as a season finale, because to me, this is easily the worst episode of the season. Would I have been less annoyed if there were 2 more episodes coming? Yes, definitely, because it did feel like an episode 8 out of a 10 episode season, and I'm a hopeful person. I would have thought to myself, okay, this was a little rough, but it will all be worth it by the end of the season. But this is the end of the season because Warner Brothers wanted the showrunners to cut down the number of episodes, and now we will most likely wait another 2 years. So to me, it's both a disappointing episode, which is even more disappointing as a season finale. Now, before you type that comment about how Game of Thrones finales never had any battles and mostly dealt with the aftermath, I know, I've seen Game of Thrones multiple times. First of all, those episodes were still packed with other important events, and second, they usually followed a peak of the season penultimate episode. House of the Dragon season 2 peaked in episode 4, and we never fully picked up steam again, even though the red sewing was impressive. You just cannot compare. So yes, had this been the build-up to a traditional episode 9 where something very important happens, people would have been more accepting of this episode 8. But the reality is that at the end of season 1, we were left with War is Coming, and at the end of season 2, we are still left with War is Coming. The pacing was off this season, and the lack of action isn't even the issue. Spending time with characters is great. Family turmoil and personal drama are great. But I kept talking about this in my episode reviews, and I will say it again because it's still true. The decisions they made to keep pulling away from moments of potential drama and confrontation again and again were really strange. They just didn't use their time well. We had Team Green pretty much carrying the season because that's where most of the actual drama was, while they had less screen time, and Team Black having their two main characters stuck narratively, with Rhaenyra not doing much until the end and Daemon hallucinating at Harrenhal for most of the season. Add to that the fact that this is technically a story about a massive civil war, and many people saying they're not as interested in these characters as they were in characters of Game of Thrones, and it's no wonder the viewers are complaining about the lack of action. People talking in rooms is riveting, only when those people are actually interesting. When Rhaenyra is repeatedly asking, "What would you have me do all season?" that's not very interesting. When you strip agency from Alicent and have the brilliant Olivia Cook do the same two facial expressions all season, that's not very interesting. When instead of character development and motivations, we have prophecy, that's not very interesting. Now, once again, this isn't to say it's all bad. There were some very well written and well performed scenes this season, and some characters were truly able to shine no matter how much screen time they were given. Like I said before, season 2 finale and season 2 in general have high highs and low lows, while the ending ultimately makes it unsatisfying. But I do want to talk about those budgeting issues behind cutting the season down from 10 to 8 episodes, because I am concerned. Here's my question: how are they planning to do the rest of the show? I know large-scale battles are expensive, and I know dragons are even more expensive, but out of all of the spin-off options, you picked the one about the Targaryen Civil War, the one with the most battles and the largest amount of dragons. So what's the plan? They have confirmed that the show will only run for 4 seasons, so that means we're halfway through it. There are so many battles and big dragon-involving events remaining that I genuinely don't know how they can pull this off. Even if you cut this in half by leaving some out completely and combining others into one event, and even if by some miracle seasons 3 and 4 go back to the 10 episode format, which is unlikely, I still don't know how this is possible without completely butchering the story. There are things you can't really skip, and there are quite a few of them. Considering they couldn't afford 2 battles this season, what were they thinking? Why make the show at all if you can't afford to do the actual big events in it? I'm not a crazy person. I have never expected them to do every single battle from the book, even though I did expect them to do more than what it seems we will be getting. But you can't tell me that it's not concerning that they can't even do what they had originally planned. And yet they're still trying to stick to their 4-season timeline. What is the rest of the show even going to look like if they couldn't afford a 10-episode season with 2 battles? Why make this show if it's too expensive? Literally any other part of the history of this fantasy universe seems like it would have been cheaper to make. But I don't think it's as simple as we need more action though. It's just as much about the writing. They're so focused on tying House of the Dragon into the main series, and particularly into the payoff of the White Walkers, one of the most hated endings to a series ever. It's insane to keep reminding viewers of this. Just do your own story and its characters justice. It's funny to me when people want to act all superior, as if saying something negative about season 2 somehow makes you not a real fan, and how did you survive the early seasons of Game of Thrones? We really don't need to go down the path of comparing the quality of this season to Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones changed television. Game of Thrones had the most gripping drama and so much happening that felt like it had depth and stakes, and most importantly, it had characters people loved. So many amazing characters: male, female, child, adult, magical, human, lowborn, highborn, all of them driven, full of agency, hungry to forge their own path. So let's just not go there when it comes to season 2 of House of the Dragon, but instead, let's remember that season 1 of this show was very well received. It had a battle at the Stepstones that was really good in episode 3, and there was no more action. Characters, drama, potential, conflict, that's what carried the season. Plus, they changed plenty from the books, so don't come for me telling me I'm just a butthurt book purist. Season 1 was great, even though it wasn't perfect. And I actually felt like it was true to the core of the story, a tragic story of how ambition and hunger for power tore a family apart. My point is, while I didn't hate this finale, and definitely not the entire season 2, particularly the first half of the season was fantastic, I'm just not really sure they're interested anymore in adapting the story they set out to adapt in season 1. When you have the director of the episode saying things like Rhaenyra and Alicent's dynamic is absolutely the love story at the center of House of the Dragon, or the writer saying that at the end of the day, it comes down to these two women, Alicent and Rhaenyra, trying to figure it out. This is a generational story, and it's a lot more complicated than that. I mean, what are we even adapting anymore? The more interviews I read and watch with the showrunners, writers, and directors, the more it seems they think they can write a better story than the actual author. And lines like, history will paint you a villain, combined with how certain characters are treated, just make me question their understanding of themes and respect for source material. This quote from George R. R. Martin came to mind again and again throughout this season for me. Everywhere you look, there are more screenwriters and producers eager to take great stories and make them their own. No matter how major a writer it is, no matter how great the book, there always seems to be someone on hand who thinks he can do better, eager to take the story and improve on it. The book is the book, the film is the film, they will tell you, as if they were saying something profound. Then they make the story their own. They never make it better though. 999 times out of 1,000, they make it worse. So that's where I am with this finale, and I can't say I'm very optimistic going forward. I'm still a fan of this fantasy universe, and I will continue watching and talking about the show, except for with very tempered expectations, unfortunately. I will also definitely be watching A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, and I am very hopeful about that adaptation. But as for House of the Dragon, I will continue enjoying it for what it is and hoping to see better writing decisions made in the future. More of the first half of season 2, less of the second half. And hopefully when it comes to season 3, they will write for the budget and number of episodes they are given, instead of delivering another oddly structured season, the second half of which mostly feels like a long trailer for the next one. But enough ranting for now. What did you guys think of this season finale and of season 2 in general? Let me know in the comments. And if you missed my review of the previous episode, I have it right here, ready for you to watch next.